And it's time for another episode of Help and Hope for 2021. It's our chance really to bring you some of the best across the Northeastern and Central Pennsylvania, really to help you blaze some awesome and rockin' trails in the new year. And now, of course, we got to get past 2020. And who better to help us out than the one and only from the Scranton area, Dr. Lauren Hazzouri in the house, the psychologist. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I am doing well. Listen, thanks for joining us. We know your wheelhouse. You've done a ton of work in various areas, but don't let me explain sort of either your research interest or what your claim to fame is in and around town. Tell us what your focus is.
Yeah, so I have a private practice in Scranton, and I also do a lot of public educational work, around the nation. I do a lot with teen girls and their moms, a lot with women, but I also see boys and men in my office too. My main focus is helping people to increase self-esteem, implement behavioral changes that can make them feel better and live better overall.
All right, so let's start from the beginning. I guess if we're looking here to create a new life and maybe less stress in 2021. 2020 has been unforgettable. You have the pandemic, you had life-changing events for a lot of people. So where do we even start to get our mind on a whole new path and track?
Mm-hmm. So I think, Ryan, like everybody else, I've been doing a lot of reflection on 2020. And while so many of us want to leave 2020 in the past and have a new fresh start in 2021, and thankfully for so many reasons, we're going to have many opportunities to do that and live in a way that feels more comfortable for many of us. At the same time, I'm quite hesitant to just, get rid of 2020 and not recognize the loss and the lives lost and the changes that we've made internally, the, reawakening of our nation as far as us recognizing, the racial disparities, just all the different things that have really come to light in 2020. We don't want to just say, whew, thank God that's over and move forward as if we go from 2019 to 2021. We want to make sure that we honor those lives that are lost. We recognize the changes that have happened collectively as a result of this trauma and, the jobs that have been lost, financial, disparity that we see in so many communities. So we want to make sure that we're not just saying 2019 to 2021, but we recognize that, 2020 is kind of like one of those before and afters. So many of us in our personal lives have had let's say we've had car accidents or we've had, death in our family. So it's like, oh yeah, before that accident, after that accident, we have those kind of major events in our lives that there's the before and the after. And 2020 is really going to be that kind of year for all of us.
And I'm so glad you actually touched on that, because I think when we look ahead to a new year, and a lot of people are trying to do a fresh start, you hit the nail on the head. We have to remember all of the trauma that took place. I think what people experience, from frontline workers to the lives that were lost. I guess the biggest thing is, as we continue to try to wrap our heads around everything, what do you think we should essentially maybe even still hold on to a tad from 2020 as far as from a learning experience and what it did for people as individuals? What did you find that was sort of the awakening for so many of your patients, or even you as a psychologist, that maybe we should keep that in our back pocket as we move into a new year?
Yeah, I think that the overwhelming feeling for so many of us is loss. I can just talk, so many of my clients have been feeling this way, but I can talk about myself, personally. The thing that it feels the most similar to for me is when I lost my father. And so I remember when, after the funeral, and I know that so many of us have experienced this, which is why I'm bringing it up. After the funeral, it was kind of like, oh gosh, now I'm just going to go back to normal life, go back to work on Monday. And then it's just kind of like that never happened. And it felt kind of funny. And so I found funny in a really empty kind of way. And so I found different ways through my grieving process to bring the memory of my father into my daily life. Like, for example, I run every day. And so for that half hour a day, I always talk to my father and pray to my dad. And so I incorporate him in my daily life the same way that as if he were here. So I still have those daily conversations with my father. And because I knew him so well, I know how he would respond to me. And so I have that daily connection, like that conscious contact with the memory of my dad, which is now a part of me. And I think that we can all take that lesson into 2020 and recognize the lives lost, the people who really showed up for all of us, like those frontline workers and our firefighters and just everybody who did all of the things as we did our duty to stay home, and the people who worked in grocery stores and whatever, and just really remembering in our daily lives in 2021 what these people did for us in 2020. So when you're at the grocery store, to give somebody that extra, hey, thanks, buddy. I think bringing that into our daily lives the same way that I do with the memory of my father, the memory of what these people have done, the lives that they've lived, the sacrifices they've made, and the lives that have been lost. I think it's really, really important in order to make us just a better people and more connected with one another than ever.
And I think coming back to what you said about this grand awakening, I believe that so many people experienced in 2020 that they could leverage almost into 2021. What are the things you think we learned that are going to make us better moving forward? Obviously, being kinder to those frontline workers who maybe people didn't give a second thought of saying, hey, thanks for what you're doing here today at the grocery store, right? Like, kind of being a wake-up call to that. But what do you think as far as what folks experienced in 2020 that will help us be better in 2021? Was it realizing what mattered with our families, our jobs? What have you found as a psychologist?
Yeah, so what I find is that so many people that were kind of on autopilot before, and taking the messages that society tells us about what's important, whether that's success and achievement, or it's earning money and a lifestyle, reaching goals and things like that. Well, all those things are of course important because we all live here. Society is where we are, not who we are, and we really are the connections that we make and the experiences and relationships that we have with other people. And I think that is more in our conscious awareness now more than ever. And so the things that I'm seeing people recognize is, number one, they've learned the lesson of humility. And humility is recognizing that, we can have increased self-esteem and recognize our value, but recognize that we're not all that, and that, all that we are is our connection with others. And so I think, people have recognized they're, are more humble today than they may have been before this experience. I think people recognize the importance of their communities. I'm so grateful for my local community, for our small businesses, for the connections that we have and the way that we all kind of stick up for each other here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. So I think that we've all recognized the importance of our neighborhoods, our communities, our families, and our friends, time at home, bacon pies and banana bread, So I think things have gotten a little bit simpler. It feels a little bit more like the 80s to me than it ever has before, where we're just kind of home and, really valuing the people that are right next to us.
So well said. And I think as we, move forward and stuff, we know some people, no matter if it was 2020 or 2021, there's still a lot of people who might be struggling with things, right? You have job loss in the mix. Maybe they did lose someone in 2020. So I guess at what point as a psychologist, what are the signs where, this is where you want to see a professional for help and to really start talking about somebody? And I want to say, to make therapy cool again and okay, right? I think there's still, despite the times now, there's still a stigma attached that, oh my gosh, why do you go to a therapist? What's wrong with you, right? So at what point, I guess, let's kind of unpack all of that. When do you see a professional, and what are some of the warning signs that maybe you want to talk to your loved one about, like, hey, let's get you to somebody so we can navigate this together?
Yeah, I think, of course, there's still a stigma to, seeking attention for your mental health and mental wellness. And it's because of our history and just where we've come from. I do think that we are getting better at recognizing the benefits of our emotional health in the same way that we do our physical health. And we're recognizing that mind-body connection, and that without one being healthy, the other really can't be either. And so we do recognize those benefits, but still taking that step to go to therapy is still a courageous one. And I can't emphasize enough that how important that step can be. And to me, and I know, of course, I'm super biased because, of course, I believe in psychology and in behavioral change and in the whole process, or I wouldn't be a clinician. But I really believe it's kind of like why wouldn't you take advantage of that if you have the opportunity? And I think that's an important point to make, too. We recognize the disparity in opportunities for people of color versus people versus other people. And so we're trying to level the playing field as a discipline, with trying to make services available to everybody, because they're just not. But if they are available to you, take advantage of that opportunity. You'll only be better for it, because behavioral change and feeling better just makes life a hell of a lot easier.
And as a psychologist, you work with a lot of teens specifically. What are some of the things they're struggling to navigate as we head into a new year, that maybe you have some words of wisdom you've been sharing with them, or you've seen a light bulb go off that you can share with some other parents who have young kids as well right now?
Yeah, so I do. I work a lot with teens and young adults, and I have a teen at home. And so, so many of their things have been disrupted, and they haven't been able to, separate and individuate the way that they normally would be able to do at this stage. And that's a really important developmental stage for them. Think about it. In adolescence, they kind of are able to form their identities separate from their families and, kind of find their groove and become more individual and separate from us a little bit. And they really haven't had that opportunity. They've been right next to us the whole time. And so, so they are really missing those opportunities, whether they be something big like the prom or something small like just hanging out with their friends and going for pizza on a Friday night. And so I recognize that my own daughter will often say, like, "Hey, Mom, can I have a hug?" And she just kind of walks up and just like throws her arms like, "Can I have a hug?" And I think they're longing for connection the same way that we all are. So recognizing that when they're a little bit off or a little bit mouthy, a little bit flippant when you ask them to, fold the laundry, recognize that they're probably emotionally starving too. And so instead of getting really upset with them, I just go over and maybe give them a hug. That might make a little bit of sense right now, just given where we're at.
I was going to just springboard off of what you said, right? So during the pandemic, all of us stuck at home, connecting virtually, using our phones. Do you think when we come back, and I don't mean to keep repeating it, but I feel like it is so prevalent and something people can relate to, the grand awakening, right, in 2021, that I think is leading people to a better version of themselves in 2021. Do you believe what happened in the pandemic with so much virtual connection, that maybe this will be a wake-up call to younger kids who have been so glued to their phone to kind of put it down and connect in real life almost?
I do think that they're starving for that, meaningful connection and in real life experiences. But boy, are those cell phones and social media and the algorithm really powerful in how really powerful.
Really addicting. Yeah.
And so, even if they recognize the importance of meaningful connection, it's a brain game. And if they're not on top of that and their parents aren't, allowing them opportunities and helping them to use social media and, the devices that are stuck to the palm of their hands. If they're not helping them to set boundaries with those devices, then the devices will win.
Gotcha. Now, you've obviously have spoke at national events. I mean, gosh, you have done blogs for the Huffington Post and then some regarding, I think, social media. That was a huge component of yours as well. So what is your advice to people, I think, in the day and age where you see so much on social media and a lot of young people and even adults compare their lives to what they see on social media? What do you address regarding that topic in a lot of your speeches you've given all over the country?
Yeah, so, I think there are a lot of benefits to this connection. Can you imagine if we were in the midst of a global pandemic without the ability to connect online and through social media? I don't know what the repercussions of that would be. So first of all, I want to state that, of course, there are benefits to social media as long as we can try to utilize it in a healthy and responsible way. Which is not easy. And so I think, the social comparison game that happens on social media is very difficult. Now, I have seen some people have a little bit of a reprieve from social comparison. A lot of, especially young girls and women, who, began to see me in therapy before the pandemic, who came in because they were experiencing anxiety or sadness and, experiencing low self-esteem. They looked very anxious or depressed before the pandemic. And then actually when they were quarantined at home and they didn't have, and they weren't out around at school and comparing themselves to other people, even in real life, they had a little reprieve in symptoms because they were like, oh, okay, like I'm actually fine. Like I'm around the people who love me most, and I'm not really looking at myself in the mirror all the time, and I'm not having to get dressed and and I'm not comparing what I have on to the other kids sitting next to me in school. But then we had an uptick in everybody starting to compare themselves online. And one good thing was that, everybody's gotten a little bit less performative on social media, and that it's, before it was all taking the selfie, where are people, it seemed like everybody was going to, these elaborate vacations and taking photos of themselves in luxury clothing, and nobody's doing that now. So there is a little bit less of that piece, but I just think that kids have a really hard time with regulating their mood and emotions because they use their phone and social media and the people that they really haven't even met in real life on there to do it.
And I think just coming back to that, so what are the psychological tips or the strategies you offer patients when they're constantly finding themselves falling into that well of, comparing themselves to what they see online? Because even though it's not as much maybe as what we saw before the pandemic, it's still there. And I think I've seen it with people even utilizing things like LinkedIn, right? Oh, wow, look at what that CEO's doing. I haven't done anything with my life. Or look at this person. So what is the self-talk, or how can you help us navigate that when those triggers pop up?
Yeah, so I think, there's a couple of things. I'm a big fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy just means that, cognition, which is thought, cognition can influence our behaviors. And so thoughts lead to feelings and feelings lead to action. So if you're thinking something that is faulty, like everybody is more successful than me on LinkedIn, or everybody on Instagram looks nicer than I do, or at least this girl does, then you're going to feel unwanted feelings. And then you're going to do things that don't make you proud. And so I often suggest to always keep monitoring what thoughts are triggered by looking at other people's social media feeds, and recognize that thoughts aren't facts. So a lot of our thinking can be quite faulty. So if you actually look at the thought and then write it down on paper, and you can see that, oh, wait a second, this actually isn't even true, because thoughts aren't facts. So you actually replace that thought with truth, and then you feel differently and then can end up behaving differently. I also think using boundaries with time on your phone, rather than having it always next to you and, going down the rabbit hole of scrolling, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is that you compare yourself on. My suggestion would be to treat your time on social media more like you would a video game. And so I don't think it's realistic to ask any of our teens or young adults to say, like, get off social media. A lot of people do take breaks, but it's just such a part of our culture at this point that, but you can limit that and pick it up for a half hour and then put it down. So I would definitely suggest putting limits on your time that you spend on social media and recognizing it for what it is, which is not necessarily a part of your everyday life, and it doesn't influence the meaningful connections that you have with the people in your family and your friends in your small communities.
I love that, especially what you said regarding thoughts are not facts. And I think when you write it down or you look at it and you stand back and you see the whole picture, that's when the light bulb goes off and you're like, yeah, wait a minute, I might be doing okay.
Yeah, because we have what we call cognitive distortions. So like our thoughts kind of get like all messed up, and when our thoughts are distorted, they make us feel really, really bad, and they kind of like jump to these big old conclusions like nobody likes me. Well, I mean, my mom kind of thinks I'm okay. So if you just replace those thoughts, not facts, with truth, you always feel differently, because if you're not feeling good about the thought, it's got to be faulty.
And on a final note, as we wind this down, as we look to 2021 and gaming, where we're heading, right? What is Dr. Lauren's maybe final thoughts or advice as we transition into a new year, and you have patients, and I'm sure people watching this just being like, oh my gosh, 2020, people are just trying to move on in a way where you can honor what happened, but still just, I don't leave it kind of behind, but still remember everything that happened. So how do you just button it all up?
I think you button it all up by really focusing on staying present and being authentic versus positive. And so I think if we are all present, living in the moment, not for the moment, and being completely authentic with our feelings and in our connections with others, then we can never go wrong.
I love it. She is the real deal. Dr. Lauren Hazzouri, we always appreciate you weighing in and offering so many great news you can use nuggets. I like to call them as a psychologist. Anything on your radar in the works? Because I know you were on the speaking circuit back in the day, doing a lot of national workshops with people, really helping teens improve their lives in all sorts of ways. Is there anything you want to give us a glimpse at that you're working on for 2020?
Well, honestly, so I mean, this was 2020 was set up to be everything that I'd worked towards, as far as like I had, so many events booked and that of course all got canceled. And so now, I too have kind of taken a step back and gotten a little bit more humbled and recognized where I really need to put my focus. And so my new goal for 2021 is to write a different book than I was set to write in 2019, because I've learned a lot of things too. And so I just kind of want to stay home and literally stay home and hang out with my family and write a book at my leisure without any deadlines that I need to attend to, because I just don't feel like doing that to myself anymore.
I think, when you and I were talking, we were setting this interview up, when I said about how do you kind of blaze a new trail and look ahead to your future, and you said, cut your hair. That's what I did.
Yeah, I got my hair chopped off. And when I look back, I thought like any time that there was any major like before and after, I've always cut my hair. And I think so many people who identify as women do that, right? Like that we like have to take, like there's definitely evidence behind the hair cutting and major life events. And so I think in order to kind of, every time I look in the mirror, I need to remember that something's different. And what's different after having experienced the loss and just all the different things in 2020 is I don't want to forget. And so I have a bob to prove it,
I love that. And you mentioned you're obviously enjoying more time with your family at home. And one fun fact about Dr. Lauren people don't know, not only are you a rock star psychologist, but apparently you also make some amazing homemade pies. So while you're spending more time at home, I know that's how you paid your way through grad school, right? Making pies and actually selling them. What is your go-to, apple or cherry or pumpkin? Like, what do you make?
Yeah, so, well, when the farmer's market was still around, it was kind of like whatever was good there. As of recent, while it's not seasonal, our favorite's blueberries. So I made a blueberry pie a couple of days ago, but now we're kind of onto the Christmas cookies.
All right. I love that. And I love that that's sort of a fun little nugget. You were talking about being at home. She's not going to be just writing a book, maybe making homemade pies. But listen, I appreciate all of the hope and help you offered for folks for 2021, Dr. Lauren Hazzouri. And the best way to find you on social media is?
Yeah. So I took a break from Instagram as of August, but I'm coming back in 2021 because I have a couple of things to share. And so at Dr_Lauren. So at Dr_Lauren.
All right. Dr. Lauren Hazzouri, as always, major thanks for a lot of great information.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.